So each state will have a agency like OREA that's charged with making sure appraisers are licensed, and so the practical impact of that is that every 2 years you have to renew your license and submit evidence of the training that's required, the education that's required, both to initially get the license and to maintain it. So the qualifications, meaning education and experience, come from the Appraiser Qualifications Board, and the standards that appraisers use, which is USPAP, comes from the Appraisal Standards Board. So the qualifications that are mandated include some amount of college coursework, as well as specific appraisal training like we're doing here. But the background to successfully complete that specialized training includes basic math and accounting skills, and we'll get into the math starting next week. Certainly a knowledge of economics, and today's appraiser certainly needs computer skills, and the fact that we're doing this course online, I think all of us will have those necessary computer skills that are required today to do efficient appraising. Real estate, we'll cover some real estate basics, but outside of appraising, there's also real estate knowledge that's needed to understand the issues that impact the values that we're looking at as appraisers. Statistics, again, that probably should be up under math and accounting. That's going to be the second part of our math sections that we'll be starting next week. Urban sociology, well, I think all kinds of sociology, where people want to live, where people want to do business, that impacts the value of land and the improvements that are put on the land. Geography ties to that, as well as location. And building construction is the quality of one building better than or worse than the building that you're appraising. So those kinds of skills and knowledge certainly are required and applied in doing real estate appraisal. So in addition to the education, appraisers need experience, and the experience is mandated as well by the Appraisal Standards Board, the Appraisal Qualifications Board, and that is gained as a trainee, and that's the term for the initial license level that you'll get the trainee license, which is essentially a kind of internship where you're working under a supervising appraiser, actually doing the work hands-on with someone who is experienced and licensed, to make sure that you gain the things that aren't the kinds of knowledge that aren't in a book or aren't easily learnable without repetition. So the last bullet says you can gain experience in related real estate occupations, and certainly that's true. I think a lot of people that have come into appraising have come from other related areas like real estate sales, perhaps a property inspector, contractor, or builder, perhaps working with a lender before. So now we'll talk about some other federal and state regulations that impact appraisers. The fair housing laws that impact appraisers came out about the same time as FIREA, the Fair Housing Amendments Act, effective March 12th, 1989, quote, prohibits discrimination in the selling, brokering, or appraising of residential real property because of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, or national origin. And so the impact certainly for appraisers is obvious in terms of not letting bias into determining the value of a property. But for lenders, it's interesting. The particular kind of concern that I've seen has to do with information in the report that may identify the particulars of any of those classes: race, color, religion, sex, handicap, national origin. And so, for example, you don't want to have pictures of people in an appraisal report where there could be an implication that there was some kind of discrimination based on who it is in the picture. Similarly, although it's hard to avoid, if there are any kind of pictures on walls or in furniture, you want to try to avoid those in the pictures you take inside a home. Any kind of religious iconography that's on the walls or tables, perhaps try to avoid those when you take your pictures as well. Environmental concerns certainly will impact value, and if there are any known or suspected, those need to be disclosed, because that has an obvious impact on value. The next bullet talks about the most recent subprime lending crisis. If the savings and loan crisis of the late 80s was the initial one, the one that we are coming out of right now certainly led to another set of regulations that impacted appraisers. The Economic Stimulus Act of 2008 raised the loan limits for FHA to insure and for VA to guarantee loans, and so then that obviously made the appraisals involved even more impactful for the higher dollar values. Now, Fannie Mae took actions that implemented this HVCC, the Home Valuation Code of Conduct, to improve accountability in the appraisal process, which, as I alluded to earlier, more strictly regulated who could interact with appraisers and how they could interact with them, in terms of a firewall, if you will, between people who have an interest in the outcome of an appraisal and the appraisers themselves. So, for example, loan officers or mortgage brokers who had an interest in a loan funding would want to make sure that the appraisal was at the value that the homeowner could qualify for the loan at, and would try to, in many cases, put overt or obvious pressure, or sometimes subtle pressure, on appraisers to make sure that they knew what the value needed to be, and brought the appraisal in at that value. And that certainly led to a number of abuses that the Stimulus Act and this Home Valuation Code of Conduct sought to address. More recently, although it's still described in detail in the book, the HVCC, or Home Valuation Code of Conduct, was sunsetted, and essentially the same kind of regulations or requirements included in the Dodd-Frank Act, the official name of which is the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010. The other regulation that came out of FIREA is USPAP, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. This is published by that Appraisal Standards Board, the ASB, which is one of the two original ones of the Appraisal Foundation. I've got the link here, as well as on the Angel page, to the online version of USPAP. We'll talk generally about it, but you will be required to take a separate course, a 7.5-hour course on USPAP, when you get ready to apply for your trainee license, if that's the path you're interested in or choose to take with appraising. And so USPAP establishes, if you will, the ground rules for appraisers, and USPAP does cover appraisals of not just real estate, but also personal property and business appraisals, as I talked about earlier. Um, it is updated and revised every 2 years, and so the next version will be coming out at the end of this year. So the key thing to remember here is that the overall purpose of USPAP is to help establish the rules of the road to assure that appraisers present information that the users of appraisals can be confident in, that the information will not be misleading, and that it will be meaningful to the appraiser's clients. So prior to FIREA, there were professional appraisal groups, several of which are noted here, and that was the more common way of determining if an appraiser was qualified. Were they members of one of these groups that had their own standards of practice and professionalism and education? Those groups still exist today. The Appraisal Institute is a group that was created out of the combination of two of the early original appraiser groups. They award the MAI and SRA designations, as these other groups you see there also have designations, but the MAI is frequently noted in commercial lending and commercial valuation requirements. For example, with banks or with government agencies may state that an MAI is required for appraisals for any purchases of real estate they're going to make. There's a group that specializes in relocation appraisals, where a company may purchase the home from one of their employees that they're going to have moved to another location, and I know that organization requires or strongly recommends the SRA, which is the residential designation from the Appraisal Institute. At the bottom, the NAIFA, National Association of Independent Fee Appraisers, is also a large national group that has designations as well that are recognized. The two above that specialize in condemnation and eminent domain work, as well as with the IRWA, as well as the tax assessment work from the IAAO, the International Association of Assessing Officers.